Okay. Welcome back again to IIKI's Leading in Extraordinary Times. We're now in session 6, and we begin to talk about adaptive leadership. And the speaker for today is Dr. Rudy Garrity. And I'd like to introduce him, whereby Dr. Rudy Garrity is a founder and director of the Adaptive Learning Solution and Adaptive Learning Forum nonprofits. Rudy is an enterprise transformation leader, consultant, and program manager to organizational total quality management and reengineering. And he also was a federal executive at the United States Department of Defense, FBI, intelligence agencies, and a federal contractor for intelligence integration. Rudy has served as a professor at Defense Systems Management College, division manager at National Security Agency, Cryptologic School, and George Washington University Knowledge Management Program. He is a writer of professional articles and an author of nonfiction books, Total Learning, Knowing and Leading as a Mindful Way of Being, and also Your Integral Life Matters. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Rudy so that Rudy can share his knowledge on adaptive learning. And once again, we thank those of you who are there and that have been following this series. Rudy, it's up to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll be there in a moment. As soon as I get my screen sharing working here. Can you see that first slide? Hello?
The slide is not showing up by itself.
It
It's
is.
showing up on another screen.
Okay. Let's do this.
Just do slideshow, right, Rudy?
Yeah, I'm going to need to do that. It's going to block all you guys out, though. Okay, hold on. Let me get myself here. Shut this off. Slideshow. Any luck with that? Can you see
Yeah,
it
that's
now?
perfect.
That
Perfect.
works.
Okay, fine. Thank you so much. Okay, starting now from the beginning. I'm sorry I was a little bit late there. I've had a chance to retitle this a few times between the times that we started to talk about it as it came down as in our publications. And I thought I would just put this title here, The Importance of Adaptive Leadership in Extraordinary Times, because I have to tell you that it hasn't always been that important, even during other times which were not as extraordinary as they are now. If you're looking at the slide now, it says learnership at the top. Basically, in my view, today it appears that the American government, institutional leaders, and cultural forces are at an apex of dysfunction, and their inability to reflect and competitively achieve democratic consensus is ascendant in a socio-economic culture that is at war with itself. Undercurrents of educationally limited, ill-informed, and perversely driven citizens and businesses appear to be in a tsunami of acrimonious communication with those of influence and positional authority. Concurrently, significant evidence of duplicitous governance, financial inequality, socioeconomic insensitivity, and escalating ecological damage has been convincingly demonstrated. We can clearly see that our adverse adversary is us. We must learn and lead better in these extraordinary times. This statement comes from one of my latest books, which is at least 6 years ago, that we thought it was really tough times back then. Just a quick summary of the background against which I come to this effort here. And as Nancy, as was written up and also previously given, I've had a lot of experience working in the defense industry and also the intel services. And this is just a list of where I made my career for about 35 years before I even got associated with the George Washington Institution. And there's just a number of things at the bottom that sort of highlight some of the interests and some of the things I've had a chance to do. Been in charge of a number of major programs at the colleges, the Defense Systems Acquisition Management College, the National Security Agency, School of Systems Acquisition, the Terrorist Threat Integration Center. Suffice it to say, I've had a lot of career building early on in my career. And all along the way, I started to gain the reputation and the capability to move among the various agencies and do program improvements. And I have to say that that was a really good learning experience. And one of the things that always came to the fore, as people in our business would know, is that sometimes it's the people aspect of these programs that are the most difficult things to get in line. Quite often we have the technologies, we have the strategies, we have the approaches, but in fact, there is some resistance as to whether change is really needed, whether management has made the right decisions to make changes, and or should the workforce want to follow through and do the things that have been requested to be done. Just an example of that, Frank Calabrese and myself, also with a good support from Art Murray, about a decade ago now, we're involved in this 505th Air Force client down on the panhandle of Florida. And we were lucky enough to get a contract with them to do a wide scale of improvement projects, along with a new technology system that they were putting in to improve information management. And we had quite an open agenda to do as many things as they wanted to do. And as we introduced them to new ideas that they might want to make part of their program. So our objectives overall were efficiency and effectiveness. The interesting thing, if you look down at this bottom of this slide, is the NIST Enterprise Performance Criteria, which is criteria that are shown on the next page, where we did a survey going in as to how much approval the Institute management functions were getting in the business from both the military and the contractor people doing the training at the 505th Command and Control Wing. And so on the left side of this diagram, you'll see leadership support all the way down to knowledge and learning as the recommended approach to working for organizational improvement that came out in the late 1990s, I guess, as far as the National Institute for Science and Technology. And I, as the one person and a few others that I was associated with, actually went through that program and decided that whatever improvement work we were doing just about everywhere for organizations, we would try to follow this format because it was quite comprehensive. And what this slide shows, that the ratings that were given by the workforce when we went in, just to see what they were thinking about these topics of management, were relatively average or below as far as what they understood the item was, why it was important or whether it applied to them and whether they thought they needed some help. And in the bottom line is what we had put together, Frank and myself, is to take the National Institute of Science and Technology criteria in the categories of direction, operations, and performance here on this slide. And that aligned very nicely with the, at that time, Frank Calabrese's a doctoral approach to leadership, learning, organization, technology, and performance as the way that we should think about knowledge management as we developed it at the Institute and at the college. Let me just stop there for a moment. How many folks that are online right now are even familiar with this early attempt by George Washington to organize some of its thinking on the KM topic? Is anybody, Art, would you, I know that you were involved in some of this early on.
The thing I can say about that, just one comment, is that has held that framework, leadership, learning, organization, technology, has held up across 36 different doctoral dissertations at the George Washington University Institute for Knowledge Management, including then what later on we started an Enterprise of the Future program. And we were able to map those 4 pillars to building an enterprise of the future that's in a constant state of self-renewal and very appropriate for the way the business climate is today. So my only comment there is, yeah, these have held up, and you can go to the iiki.org website, or there's actually enterpriseofthefuture.org. So those are 2 websites you can go to and learn a little bit more in depth about those pillars, but they're a solid foundation.
Thank you for that. Anybody else comment? The
Nothing I've been experienced with.
go ahead. Somebody else in? Dan? Okay. On this diagram on the right-hand side, which is mostly covered by the list of people who are here in the program, were the list of topics that were up for conversation and for implementation at the 505th. If you look down the list, you'll see that most of those are directed towards some element of this list of management capabilities that NIST had recommended. At the bottom, though, we added the knowledge creation because we were basically there because due to Mike Stankowski and his relationship with L3 Communications, the opportunity was created for us to be the chosen contractor to come in and work and support L3 Communication in, first of all, winning this piece of work, and then going about making the changes that they needed to make over a 3-year period of time. So we went in with basically neophytes, the 2 or 3 of us who worked on and off on the program, basically neophytes on exactly the Air Force program. What they did was train all of the pilots and the associate people who are logistically supporting the weaponry that they took to various, I think it was CENTCOM, the weaponry they took and practiced warfighting. They actually did these once or twice a year. Half of the school turned out to support the Japan, South Korea, that area. They would run an exercise that took a month or so, where they actually took the aircraft, the ships and so forth, and did defensive maneuvers, offensive maneuvers. And of course, what they were doing is what they were teaching back at the college. So you had the teaching end of it and then the execution end of it. And one of the things that the 505th wanted us to do is to somehow get both sides of the house talking the same language, and particularly to talk more about information sharing and building knowledge. And so what you see on this right side of this thing was a lot of the things we had an opportunity to bring to them. And we did run a complete training program using this particular model. So the training went on month after month after month. and we reviewed it as people changed and redid the training again and again. And the whole idea was to wrap our mind around how does an organization work in the public sector, particularly because we were interested not only in the enterprise itself, but how it fit within the, let's say, the community or the world community that in which it had to perform. Now, that point there is where I'm going to take a moment just to stop and insert an idea that many of us are familiar with, but the action learning concept was always very popular, and Michael Marquardt was influential in books, and even I think it was associated with George Washington, in making the point that we needed to have adaptive leaders that were actively involved in change management. That was one of his big emphasis back in those days, because I'm talking about now over a decade ago. And here he said that there were benefits, applications, and program components that had to be taken care of for an organization to maintain its status, to grow its performance, and to be reflected in its market space. And so now, not only was he an encouraging person on organizational change, Michael also said that it wasn't only the doing of the change to get the results that you wanted the people involved in the change to learn more about how to think about the learning itself, because learning had to be going on exponentially as improvements were being made. So that's going to be helpful as I move somewhat forward, because right for today's topic, here I have basically a comparison of what we taught in leadership programs for years and years and years. Basically, a broad range of standard ways that a leader could choose to work with his subordinates. He'd be very directive and tell subordinates what they want, what he wanted them to do, and they should be expected to do that. Or we were recommending that less of that go on. Even in the military, it should be more consultative, in which there was a discussion of priorities, alternatives, and best approach with others who were going to participate in any major changes to the organization or how the organization worked. Then there was a few folks that came out with the servant leadership to encourage others to think and act with their own best knowledge in spirit what was going on in society, where leaders and managers are taken into account as being too rough or too hard to deal with. However, for our purpose, adaptive leadership is essentially the leaders who are in charge. That would be the enterprise executives, the major unit leaders, and supervisors should be participating in periodic strategy decisions and performance reviews. This should be their responsibility. Their roles as continuous leaders, knowledge managers, both in analyzing and changing content and context in the total environment, in prioritizing, deciding, and implementing improvements, are essential in timely enterprise resilience in extraordinary times. The point I'm trying to make there is that an after action report on ourselves between Frank, myself, and a few others was that we were not successful to the degree we should have been because we didn't have a program for the leaders that specifically enhanced their interest in how they were change agents. And it wasn't a matter of simply giving out directives and having people follow what they're told, but they needed personal involvement using one of the other change management initiatives, but they had to be showing that they in turn supported the direction that the organization. And what I'm adding to that story here is that the conducting of periodic surveys and analysis of the enterprise environment, supported by the 5 reasoning competencies and the 4 social systems learning process I'm going to talk to provides information and knowledge insights for decision-making and foresight for essential individual, organizational, community, and societal domains for further development and transformation. So the learning and our learning was we were not really prepared to deal with the leaders, the major unit leaders, which would be the businesses underneath that, and the supervisors at the working level. We did not form them into a leadership set of folks who agreed and stated what they agreed to do and ensured that they were encouraging in every way they could to keep the organization, which sometimes was dispersed, to keep going in the same direction to the degree that they had accepted to make change. And so in the effort, we did not develop the leadership team that should have been better adaptive leaders by pushing the organization, and it's really important during extraordinary times. So that was our lesson, and for me, that was sort of a new finding because it ran right along with what I was doing in the area of some writing on this very topic. Just to show that more clearly, on this slide, we have sort of the executives and some of the managers should be involved in strategic planning. And those managers working with supervisors should definitely be involved in periodic review and analyses. And if you get that vertical alignment, you get the executives through the managers to the supervisors and all the way back up the chain. And for an organization, that way you get direction, operations, and performance all aligned, people talking to one another about what's being accomplished as changes are being made. Hence, you get continuous organizational learning and continuous performance improvement. And I'm just going to pause right there because from this point on, I'm going to be showing you how that was working to inform me, myself, and I to understand that the work I was doing that's related to a doctoral dissertation I had done on the subject of total quality management and organizational achievement on the terms of total quality management. I never had appreciated the adaptive leadership approach and how important it was if you're going to keep things moving. And it's my own sense that an awful lot of places that I've worked, that the workforce of the client itself, that the leaders were not in sync at the various levels of the organization. They didn't seem to know how things were changing in a relationship to one another and what was expected of them. And therefore, it was consistent with my own working on the concept of, shouldn't there be a learning program for people who are in business that they themselves feel like the program is directed towards their own knowledge, skills, and abilities. And so what we're doing is totally consistent with their own life, work, and development. So what I'm showing you here is in parallel to what I was telling you about our work with the 505th, I had an ongoing program to document and improve the work that I was doing to try to write a book about how to help the people portion of your organization perform better, because the effort was focused on giving them something personal that they could get back for being better leaders and better performers of their responsibility. And on the bottom of this slide, that's simply a flow diagram that some of you who have helped me on that particular art. In the last book I wrote on the subject, the book, you can, in order to understand it, I laid out all the chapters and how this thing syncs up together. For today, I'm only addressing these two pieces. I'm addressing a segment called interdisciplinary reasoning competencies and how this group of chapters in the book, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, these activities are heavy-duty learning activities that drive chapter 10, which is on personal development, chapter 11 on organizational development, chapter 12 on community development, global evolution for the organization. So what I'm going to talk about going forward is why this was chosen, why I created these pieces, and how, if you look at chapter 9, it comes home to adaptive leadership. If you don't have adaptive leadership, this engine of change that's right here, chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, do not influence the organization, the people, and the customers that are all a part of why we want the enterprise to succeed. I'm going to take a pause there just to assure that folks, I haven't left folks behind, because I'm jumping now to show you, and you'll see the little star that goes along. All along the way, we have adaptive leaders and adaptive leadership in the play of making reasoning competencies be directed towards improved personal development, improved organizational high performance, improved community common good, and improved societal enlightenment. And so that's the story that I'm going to go into in order to drive home. We need to have constant, assertive, informed, adaptive leadership all along the way in the organization. The rest of this diagram is simply for people who would be interested in the whole book and the whole course on all aspects of a person's life or a person's business life and how they might improve it. And that takes me to the 5 key topics that make up the engine. In creating this concept and how I've been using it, we have 5 what I would call reasoning competencies that in turn are going to drive the 4 social system learning domains. And I'll just let you scan down them with me. The first one is systems thinking. And if you go back a long time ago to Peter Senge, back around 1990, he had his book out in the 5th discipline. And in a lot of places that I had worked, this was influential. So suddenly, all of a sudden, systems thinking in so many ways was thought to be the way to bring things together in a way that people could understand them together, see how things are cross-related to one another, and support more systems thinking. So I have a slide that talks about systems thinking. I'm going to get to it in a few minutes, but I'm just letting you know that starting off, expanding the range of what the factors might be in any kind of organizational review or organizational improvement, how expanding the view that you use in the analysis of how well that's working is very important. I can't tell you how many programs I've on. I've done at least two dozen re-engineering projects and things of that nature, where we always were charged and being paid to do a piece of work without including the factors that we should be including, that the management team that hired us did not think those things were considerable in making any improvement, but they were. The second thing that I learned in this business is the pattern recognition competency. And we would know this even though we didn't spend time working on this. It focuses on our ability to recognize those pre-programmed aspects of ourselves and others, and on the need for us to better manage our reasoning based upon why and how we think, learn, know, lead, and pursue certain objectives. I haven't known too many folks who have actually had an opportunity with this, but for me, when I was on the Defense Systems Management College faculty, I was a professor down there coming up from New Jersey, and I had a chance to actually be involved in the systems acquisition management business, which was extraordinarily complex and with so many people involved. And we were talking to people who were building the ships, the planes, the logistics, and everything needed in the Defense Department. But we had a segment that said, unless we improve our ability to talk to one another and understand where each is coming from and why people would have different views, we were missing the bet in communication. Well, we spent a good amount of time, and I'll show you some of the things we did in understanding one another. The third thing that I learned in this process was situational learning, which the strong point that I wanted to bring to our program at George Washington, which was that situational learning as a competency is a significant element in human capital development and becoming what I call a learnership practitioner. Learnership, in my jargon, is learning and leadership combined, the learning leader combination. And it's not every situation is the same, even in the same organization, even at similar times or experiences. Some situations are routine and need little attention, while at the other end of the continuum, they may be significantly life or career threatening. What information, what data and information is accurate and relevant and used is particularly important in bridging the gaps, let's say, between the financial manager of the program and the head technician of the program, or the engineer designing the particular piece of equipment. Relationships around that table when decisions are being made are significantly important. At the time that I was doing that, I didn't realize until I came into the George Washington family that the next step up was knowledge management. The knowledge management competency was the core element in becoming a learnership practitioner, because it's the knowledge repository for situational learning artifacts. And it's the storehouse of tacit and explicit knowledge used by adaptive leaders throughout all enterprise business processes. So my experience with IKI, as we expanded and as we did our consulting, was that knowledge management was really what we wanted to get to, because simply collecting information and sharing information, we could never be sure that the information was turning into knowledge that was relevant to the particular process or task at hand. And then lastly, and I had this from the beginning, I didn't realize how important it was going to be until I actually did some consulting, that adaptive leadership, it is the foundational anchor in the learnership discipline because it moves knowledge into action. Theory is combined with practical experience and leads to meaningful decision-making for both individuals and social organizations. So as you can see in the note below, I see this as a driving learning lesson in that if you are doing organizational improvement, a mindset that says, let's be systems thinkers, let's look large, let's understand the personnel involved and their preferred way of thinking and being. Let's look at situational learning where we have an opportunity to separate facts from fiction, and also let's make sure our enterprise leaders are astute decision makers in all enterprise functions, set priorities when choosing organizational action, and are alert for operational problem solving and finding improvement opportunities. So this is something that I had been putting together for a long time as I was trying to be more informed as I moved from total quality management into knowledge management and the influence of the work of others who were teaching and we were sharing information with at the IKM. And that was a significant step up for me. And then adding the adaptive leadership and trying to communicate to leaders everywhere that if you are a leader, you have the responsibility to be active and continuously involved in moving the organization forward to new ideas, new theories, new concepts, and new tools. And so that's why that became an engine which I now teach as part of a lifelong learning lesson to anyone who cares to listen on how do you grow yourself as you become a professional in whatever industry or business that you're in. You need to be an assertive, aggressive, adaptive leader who not only helps find out what needs to be changed and getting behind of the change that's happening to make sure that things actually move forward. Does anyone have a comment? I'm going to take a pause here for a comment on that whole stream of events where adaptive learning is in fact what leaders are doing. They're not just making up strategies and taking notes and putting them in books full of policies and singing them down for other people to do what they need to do. That is not a successful way of being a change maker or an organizational improver. Any comments? Okay. Now, we're going to start moving into some more of my right-brained kind of documents as I pull this story together, because in teaching this, and what you probably don't know, but I'm heavily right-brained and so forth. Most of what I do in an educational program is make together ideas that come together so I can make a graphic of it so we can see relationships. And there's about 50 of them in the books that I have out now, Your Integral Life Matters. So there is a left-brained narrative that one can read and a right-brain narrative that one can see what relationships are and why certain things are directly related to other important aspects of what we're talking about. And so here I'm talking about organizational change, the importance of adaptive leadership, as you can see on the lower right side, my little red star saying, let's not forget adaptive leadership and learnership. My view is this: you have to be able to grow at the micro level, personal microsystems. That what I'm talking about there is every individual, whether they're a manager or just a participant, needs to know something about being a good follower. Followership supports people achieving self-fulfillment, which is good for them as individuals. At the macro level, we have the organization level where we're talking more about leadership here, particularly adaptive leadership. And through that effort at the micro or macro level, we're driving the organization to high performance. To the right of that, to the degree that we're including something going on within the community that the organization is for a participant, you have basically people working for the common good, and the activity is called citizenship. And on the right side, you can put those all together into a societal meta system point of view, where statesmanship is the goal and human enlightenment or global enlightenment or things of that nature encompasses everything before it. So what I'm saying to the folks here is that if we have in our organizations, whether that organization is a private sector organization or whether it's a public sector entity, whether it is just a personal business, it matters that we have goals and attitudes and relationships and competencies that help us either become self-fulfilled, high-performing in the common good and in human enlightenment. And if one were trying to choose a strategy for succeeding through most of their life, self-fulfillment, high performance, the common good, and human enlightenment are good practices to pursue. And adaptive leadership is the one that takes everything that's being learned, everything that has to be improved, and people take responsibility for themselves and others to do the job and be supportive as time requires. Okay, taking that forward now, I'm going to go pretty quickly to say, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to improve personal self-fulfillment. We're going to improve organizational high performance. We're going to improve community common good, and we're going to improve societal enlightenment. That is a very, very broad, comprehensive human social system development goal or objective. And for the work that I do, personally separate from consulting or coaching, is trying to make this happen in a reality and do training that helps organizations and individuals pursue these kinds of objectives for themselves. And in doing that, we have to take into account that if you do some research as to what people really expect, they can think, if they're encouraged to do so, about the various knowledge spheres in which information, knowledge, and behavior can be grouped. The one I have over here is the social, political, economic, ecological, geographical, and technological. That all happens to come from some work that was being done by the World Future Society quite a number of years ago. They probably changed the categories somewhat. But the idea is that an experienced knowledge person who's growing and helping has some sense of how things are moving in these 6 dimensions of the human sphere. And then on the right side, a set of cognitive or emotionally based ideals keeps coming up all the time as you look at the literature on how organizations and how communities and how societies could be or should be thinking about what their goals are or what their overarching worldviews are. And I have 6 pairs of them here: the truth and honesty, love and happiness, justice and equality, beauty and goodness, responsibility and trust, freedom and democracy. I call that the American way of being. It's a unique experiment in social, political, and economic inclusiveness. And if you put it together in a sort of a summary diagram, what we have is the reasoning competencies on the left. This is an engine that we go through on a daily basis as we learn, as we grow, as we develop, we take action. That in turn, this box in turn over here, drives the social systems that are involved, 4 major social systems, to these universal goals that are surrounded by universal ideas and spheres. And if we were to just take it piece by piece, and that's what I hope individuals, and try to do myself, is to think about, what am I doing in my micro domain? Am I basically over here in the micro system, which is number 10 in my chart, personal health, personal ability, and personal character, is getting input from systems thinking, situational learning, pattern recognition, knowledge management, and adaptive leadership. These competencies are in the personal domain, driving my abilities here. And I can actually, or in an organization, we could do information gathering, systems analysis, strategy development, strategy implementation, review the results, take action, take action, take action wherever necessary. There is a logic to how one conducts themselves for their own self-benefit of self-fulfillment. you can take that same notion over here on the right side, where we have the organization, direction, operations, and performance. So the suggestion is that from an organizational point of view or a personal point of view, in each case, with the proper thinking and the help of or guidance, we can do a systematic analysis of our personal, organizational, community, and societal system performance. And if we do that as part of our work in our organization, we will be thinking about how to improve strategic planning to better fit into our organizational needs, our organization within the community, our organization with the people that we have, so we have a holistic view of how to achieve oneness with the system of systems that we participate in. If I look at it from a over the life development, this chart has been one of the ones most interesting to folks as a notional view, that if you took a lifetime, let's say 100 years, and across that period of time, you wanted to improve your thinking, learning, knowing, leading, and achieving in all the dimensions of the personal, organizational, community, and societal levels of your engagement, life sort of grows according to this blue line. It's just notional, but it starts off along this blue line as we go through our prolonged adolescence, as we move to our middle career, as we get to a point that maybe we're getting near the midlife career reflection and renewal point of our lives, we have a decision to make. Now, not most people would think about this, but the decision could be that, and I happen to have two children that are in this zone, they're thinking about, well, they've done the major part of their work, and they're going to move into this line. This blue line will continue. They don't have to worry too much about life or career renewal. And when they get to be about 80, they will probably see their performance decline as time goes on. I partly let them get away with that because as their father, they don't necessarily think that I have any idea of how to help them live their life better. But I've been telling them, I didn't even begin to grow until I was about 50. And I started to decide there is a period where you can reflect and renew yourself. And I just popped myself too far into this thing here. My view is that lifelong learning is a goal, is an objective, and we should be working towards it. And adaptive leadership on our part and other people's part helps us always become aware of where the opportunities for improvement are. And that doesn't end when you get to midlife. It continues to go on for a long time. And with that said, I'm going to make a change to how I approach, at least for your thinking, what I'm trying to do here. And what I'm trying to do is a mindset, because I'm going to end up with an overarching mindset of how individuals can optimize the relationships in life and see it on one graphic, how everything interplays with everything else. And what you see here is on this graphic, there are areas. On the left side, you see systems thinking. I have the ST, which is the white background of this diagram. Right next to it is PR, pattern recognition. Then I have situational learning, number 3. Then I have the adaptive leadership is in yellow, AL, and then I have knowledge management. And they're all appearing here because those are areas that we're going to improve in, but they are improving in terms of over here, personal self-fulfillment, the common good, organizational high performance, societal enlightenment. Once again, though, just as a reminder, adaptive learners are able to know, use reasoning competencies to identify potential external effects in 4 social system domains, and that knowledge management improvements occur from being able to think this way, use the tools, use the technologies, learn the language, and be a change agent, pushing everything for the organization forward into the future. I'm going to take a pause there because I've given you an awful lot of stuff just to let flow in your mind a little bit, that I'm still building the case for adaptive leadership and learnership. And the whole idea is to cross into the 5 major domains that we have as our life experience, and to keep people's minds focused on how they can do this for themselves and for others as they work with them. And there's a whole educational program behind each and every one of these. And I'm going to take a pause there. And Art, if you're still with me on this, I'd like to get your comment on some of these, because you've helped me understand a lot of this as we've talked over the years, as it played with some of the things that you've been devising as far as deep learnership and deep leadership and things like that. Could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, I think, Mike, just a couple of quick thoughts, no particular order. A lot of good lessons learned. I mean, and Rudy, you've been true to form in that what you presented is, as always, is extremely comprehensive. You have a massive body of work, and I've even been in your home where you have books just piled to the ceiling. And so what you present here is just a fraction of your lifelong work, and we appreciate your sharing that with us. But again, a couple of quick thoughts. The lessons learned side, one takeaway that I got reflecting back on our experience in the Air Force wing is that, yeah, the leader has to be a change agent in this particular, era and epoch. Those old styles of leadership, which the military customer that we had was very much entrenched in. There was a big challenge for them to move into this role of adaptive, or this realm of adaptive leadership, simply because they, as change agents, they never really saw themselves as change agents. They were more execution agents, right? So that was a big takeaway, and that's probably something that we even need to focus on more at leadership at all levels. The other good thing is I see, and I want to point out this to everyone, how all of these sessions tie together. So, Steve showed us, and Rudy, you've pointed out the individual level, right? Your integral life matters. So you're working on this self-reflection and the individual self, but then how that impacts at the family level, at the organizational level, and all the way up through society. And so Steve, in his session, clearly showed us that, hey, what we do definitely impacts our entire environment, and our future. Annie, you've talked about the organizational brain, right? And so everything Rudy's talked about here, I think, ties into what you said. I'll let you, and I know we're up against time, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on how this ties into your work with the organizational brain in that. And John Lewis's change model. He's got his change model. Rudy, you provide some very good attributes that I think feed into that change model. So my main takeaway, and I'll shift it over to Annie, because I know she's got to go and we're running up against time, but this all definitely ties together in a remarkable way. So thank you. And Annie, how about you? What are your thoughts from based on your work and how this ties into it?
Oh, absolutely. I was looking at this, and it is a comprehensive model. I think it ties directly into my work at the point where you do get to adaptive leadership, because I point toward strategy formulation and based on history or the backstory. And so therefore, when you get to that point, you need to be able to adapt and be able to change, reflective of what you've kind of done in the past and also the experience that you have to be able to move forward. So yeah, I do see a direct connection of this, especially when you get to like situational leadership and adaptive leadership, also even back to pattern recognition and systems. So all of that ties right into that same model of moving it through the data, information, intelligence, and then knowledge management, which is where this kind of groups together so that we can actually improve based on what we know about ourselves and our learning. So it's very comprehensive, but I think, Art, you did a really good job of summing it up as to how it related to all of the other areas. And I think that it is, like I said, it's very comprehensive and it actually does link to most of all of the, or not most, but all of the other areas that we've talked to. Very interesting, Art. And you know, when you were doing this, I started thinking because I was in a brainstorming session once, and my whole point was that all leadership is not the same. So we were trying to decide on developmental steps for roles within the organizations, especially within knowledge management. And I brought up the leadership group and I said, this group also needs to go through various phases. And we argued so much on that because they said, no, once you reach that, you reached it. But I'm like, no, but certain people come in with different levels. And therefore, I want to know the levels that they're at because of their decision-making capabilities. So I actually propositioned that when you bring them in, you look at them as intern, novice, you know, journeyman, senior, or expert. And I said that to me should be a way that we weigh out our leaders. And this kind of brought all of that back to me about that brainstorming session when we were going through how we actually get our leaders to adapt and actually move forward in executing good decisions within organizations. So
I thank you very much for that. I'm going to stop right here. Our time is now gone. And I sort of suspected I was going to do that. What I'd like to do, there's other charts and stuff, and it brings us to a closure. How about if anybody's interested, I can easily send you just a copy of the diagrams, and so you can have it in hard copy or print it out. But I just assume leave it there because it makes the major point that, and Annie was excellent on that, and I appreciate the fact, Annie, that there's a couple of items here that do link to some of the things that you and I have talked about to find the linkage for. And because I've been so honed on the personality and the personal of it, that I've been sort of alone in being able to express it. And I've always felt that you had a deeper knowledge of it. And Art, your summary idea was so helpful. And I'm going to leave it here because this is like a major stop. But if there's any interest, I can just send it to everybody who's been on the film here.
yeah, because Candace specifically put in the chat that she wants a copy of the articles. Now, also, I want to remind everyone, because I know we're at the top of the hour, that we will be having these on YouTube as well. And at the end of this session, we'll be sending out the comprehensive list of all of them with the YouTube so that we can share them with others as well. Rudy, I want to thank you for an insightful and informative presentation. And once again, I think that we are looking forward to the next one, which is with Dr. Bill Halal, and that will be next Wednesday. So we encourage you to invite others and we encourage you to come back again. Thank you. And once again, we are IIKI with Leading in Extraordinary Times.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rudy. Great presentation. A lot to absorb.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was great.
Thank you.